On today's show, the San Diego Padres, man, it's been back and forth all year, but they got a sweep against the A's with 2 walk-offs in a row, and now they face the allegedly lowly New York Mets. We're going to be previewing the series, talking about the biggest storylines and the pitching matchups, and I'm being joined by the host of Locked On Mets, Ryan Finkelstein. That's right, it's a fun Friday podcast for sure. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Friday, June 13th. I am just now realizing what that means. Hopefully, is not a bad omen, frankly, for both teams. I am your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiiipeno, or at @LO_Padres. You guys know the deal. Wherever your pods are available, go check that out. We are back here, Locked On Padres, folks. I know you guys missed me. I know you were just clamoring, the millions of you at home, for a podcast. My apologies. Had a lot of personal stuff come up, but I'm being joined by, to make up for it, with one of the best Mets fans in the business, good friend of mine, Mr. Ryan Finkelstein, host of Locked On Mets and managing editor for Just Baseball, host of Who's Better Baseball, and just all around good lad. Sir, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You got me in a much better mood than we thought it was going to be about half an hour ago, when it seemed like the Mets were going to lose to the Marlins, drop their second consecutive series against the lowly Marlins. So now I got a little bit of a smile on my face. I'm feeling good. Let's talk some baseball.
Absolutely, man. And talk baseball we will, because it's going to be a fun series. It's always fun, frankly, whenever the Padres are playing a New York team, because I see them more. So it's always fun for me, since I am on an East Coast lad. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by Game Time, though. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Ryan, first of all, let's talk about it this way. You guys have been going through the ringer. You know, I see the tweets. I see the slander. The lol Mets. Everyone loves doing that. I saw the Frank the Tank. We haven't hit a hit with bases loaded in 20 years. Whatever the heck he said. What is the general vibe of this season for the New York Mets? Because it has felt, from the outsider's perspective, I don't feel like they were necessarily expected to be good. But they've still found a way to have some very Mets moments this year. And I think that's kind of, hopefully, will come into play against the Padres this weekend. But just in general, what's kind of the vibe here? What's going on? Who are the biggest players? Who are the most biggest, speak. Make sure I don't talk anymore. Yeah.
So I'll say this, the outside perspective, what the Mets are going to be this year probably was about what they have been, like probably a little worse than 500, be a seller again. But internally, like, Mets fans believed in this team, and they were sold on the fact that this was going to be a team that competed for a playoff spot. And they started off 0-5. Everyone was jumping off the bandwagon. They then won 12 out of 15 games. Everyone hopped back on, and they played pretty much from when Francisco Alvarez went down, some of the worst baseball you'll ever see in the month of May. I mean, just awful. I've seen a stat that pretty much perfectly encapsulates the Mets this year. I think they have won more games than any team in baseball where they have come behind in when they've been losing 8th inning or later, and they've blown more games than any team when they've been winning. So it's just one of those years. They either win in epic fashion, lose in epic fashion. Tonight, a great example of that. But it's a team where you look at their lineup and you're like, all right, they could get into this mix. But it really has to happen now, because I think they're going to have a quick trigger to sell a bunch of pieces again. I think they know their real window is beyond this year. So if they aren't sort of squarely in the mix, then they're going to be big time sellers. But for now, if you're a Mets fan, this is the time to tune in and see if they can make a season out of this.
Yeah, it's really amazing, because both the Padres and the Mets really do share a lot in common. These are two teams that kind of, burst onto the scene. In the case of the Mets, they've always sort of had, the big market and the money, but the ownership, get the new owner, you spend all this money, you have a good season, blah, blah, blah. And then both of us literally had the exact same experience. I really think it was the exact same, albeit Mets were eliminated a little bit earlier, but still it was very similar. Both teams just disastrously disappointing. It's just amazing how much things can switch. And I'm not trying to brag, but it feels like things have really switched entirely ever since the SNY broadcast started running with the idea that Joe Musgrove was cheating in that playoff game. But no, in all seriousness, it really is wild seeing everything change so quickly. And I guess that's just baseball, but with the Mets, it feels like it's been particularly profound in that way, where it's a 100-win season. You blow that last week series, regular season series against the Braves, and the playoffs happen, obviously. And then, the Edwin Diaz injury, which broke my heart as I was rooting for Team Puerto Rico. And then this year, he's been up and down and whatnot. It's just been, it feels like it's been really tough times over there for a team that at one point was looking great. And I think that just shows you how quickly things in baseball can flip, frankly. Any sport, it flips, but baseball in particular. And I'm just really amazed, honestly, at just how much the Mets continue to do this. I think it's just really one of the eighth wonder of the world, I guess some would say. But, or go ahead.
I was going to say this week, I wrote a piece for us at Just Baseball talking about which core should the Mets believe in. And it was mostly a Pete Alonso article. What are they going to do there? But you go back to 2022, and it felt like the Mets had a core that they believed in. They went into that offseason. Mm-hmm. They signed Nemo. They signed Diaz. They obviously already had Lindor locked up. It felt like they were on the cusp of something. Like you said, they've fallen so flat. I think the good thing out of last year is they made the most out of it. And I think that'd be the difference between these two teams. I feel like the Mets were maybe more self-aware at the deadline last year and were able to improve their farm system. The Padres, they sort of decided that, and it makes sense. They had a team on paper, I think, that had a better shot to make a run in the second half last year. But the Mets at least made the most of a bad situation last year, but they can't really get out of it. It seems like they're still stuck in whatever happened in 2022. And the last 2 weeks has been better, but I mean, if JD Martinez hits one on the warning track tonight, I'm a lot more pessimistic, and they would have lost the series to the Marlins, and any of the momentum that they had is gone. So, yeah, it's tough to fully buy into the Mets right now. It is crazy that it was not even 2 full years ago that they won 101 games, but it feels like a lifetime ago, and it feels like a team that's still looking for what that next identity is going to be.
Yeah, and I think one thing I want to start off with, too, is it doesn't feel like the Mets, and I know that everyone wants to, say, oh, the Mets did something stupid, but it doesn't feel like from a roster construction standpoint that they did anything like crazy bad. And that's one distinction between the Padres and the Mets, where the Padres, you can point to stuff, whether it be the Eric Hosmer stuff, you can point to losing Juan Soto, and then you can point to this year, the Xander Bogaerts contract. While the Mets, it's like, Nebo had a great year. Lindor is one of the best shortstops in baseball. Cool. Okay. We needed some pitching. We signed 2 Hall of Famers in Verlander, Scherzer. Okay. We've got a great prospect at catcher. Jeff McNeil won the batting title. Pete Alonso hits a bunch of home runs. It didn't feel like they did anything that was like, oh, that's why they fell apart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know what? Like Billy Epler last offseason, you look at the moves he made, they were great. Like Kodai Senga, fantastic signing. Tommy Pham picked up. He did really well. What it was actually, it was the guys that were great in 2022 that weren't, like Jeff McNeil, Starlin Marte, who was hurt last year but had a terrible season. So it was some of that. And then I really don't think that you can overstate enough how much the Edwin Diaz injury really crippled them. And you don't want to just point to that all year when it was happening, but it knocked everyone or pushed everyone up a peg in the bullpen. And instead of having David Robertson as an elite 8th inning guy, he was the closer. And then those 7th and 8th innings were a lot harder for the Mets. And last year, they just lost a lot of games that they probably shouldn't have. And also, Max Scherzer did not pitch well before he got dealt. So there was a lot of games where things didn't work out with him on the mound. So it was a weird year. And yeah, like even this offseason, you could look at what they did. And like, again, it's been Jeff McNeil again. It's the guys that were kept around that were supposed to be better than this that have struggled. Whereas like Luis Severino looks like an amazing signing at this point. Some of the bullpen additions they made have worked out. So they've done some good things. And yeah, it's just been typical Mets luck, I guess, where they just can't become that sustainable winner that Steve Cohen wants.
Hey, believe me, Padres fans can relate. They've had plenty of players that have not come through, especially last year. And Ryan, who was the one player for the Mets that didn't disappoint last year?
The one player?
Yeah, there was one batter that did pretty well that lived up to his
Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Anyway, love Lindor. Anyway, But folks, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically, talk also about the Padres, and we're going to talk about some pitching matchups, other big storylines of this series. But first, I need to talk to you about everybody's favorite topic. No, it's not something baseball related. No, it's not gambling related. No, it's not candy. It's not movies. No, we're talking about taxes, folks, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. And here on Locked On Padres, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, playoffs, whatever. It's year round. But you know what else is year round, man? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. So don't let them do it, man. Don't let them target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. It's tough. Everyone hates doing it. But over at Tax Network, here's the thing. Everybody's got, you need a little bit of help, guys. Don't act like it's the end of the world. The school didn't teach us anything practically, as far as I'm concerned, at least in high school and middle school. They're like, oh, learn A squared and B squared. But no, we won't tell you what your voting rights or how you do taxes. I don't know why I'm randomly getting upset. But Tax Network, they have you covered with over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion. Not million, $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in the episode description as well. Go check it out. And just like that, folks, it caught me drinking my water there. Just like that, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, your team every day, free and available on all platforms. Ryan, after one of my weirdest ad reads in a while, I don't know why I got really carried away there. Let's get carried away with the Padres and Mets. This weekend, I think, is a really interesting series, not just because we're covering it and not just because of the reasons of, it's something close to me that I can appreciate, although I will not be, unfortunately, in New York for some reason this weekend. I will not. I will actually be in DC, so any DC homies, just say hi, I guess. Here's the thing. The Padres have had such an up and down season. They've been a team of inconsistency. So while, yes, they just swept the A's. Yes, Donovan Solano hit 2 home runs, and Jackson Merrill hit 2 home runs, including a walk-off, which was some sort of record. It was like the first rookie to ever have 2 home runs and one of them be a walk-off. That's pretty nuts. The Merrill madness is real, but they are the definition of the it's over, we are so back team. Because this year they have had plenty of amazing series. They beat the Dodgers, Jerks and Profar after being called irrelevant. Then what do? They get swept by the Rockies. They beat the Braves. What do they do after that? They get swept by the Angels. This has been a team that lives for inconsistency. And while I do object to strength of schedule, I think that that's dumb for baseball, frankly. It's something that is fun to complain about because it is true you should be beating the bad teams. But I don't know about you. I don't care that the Phillies haven't played a lot of great teams so far. You still are like 15 games up on everybody else. Like, you still have to win the games. And for me, it's more about the Padres' consistency that bothers me. And while they have done better this year, I pointed out on the podcast a month ago, they won 4 games in a row. I forgot who it was that they won 4 against, but they hadn't done that since September 17th last year. So there is reason to believe, a lot of reasons, that this Padres team is better. They're better in high leverage situations. The pitching is better, more depth in the lineup with the aforementioned Merrill and Solano. But even still, this is going to be tough. I want to talk to you, though, about while the Mets have been struggling, who are the people to watch out for? What is going on with the Mets exactly? Who are the batters that are on fire or not? And same thing goes for the pitching and especially the bullpen, because I feel like the bullpen is one very clear thing that the Padres are significantly better than the Mets right now, but I could be wrong.
Well, so the bullpen for the Mets in May was the worst in baseball. I mean, really, I think their pitching staff might have been the worst in baseball in general, but the bullpen in particular was really bad. Mm-hmm. They've found some solid ground over the past couple of weeks. There was the Jorge Lopez situation, which for those of you Padres fans who don't know, Jorge Lopez chucks his glove into the crowd. Yeah, you might have forgot about that. That was the ultimate LOL Mets moment of the year. He then it seems like it was just a mistake as far as speaking a second language, but he calls the Mets the worst bleeping team in baseball, but he meant he was the worst teammate regardless. That same night, the Mets had a players-only meeting where Francisco Lindor sort of led a meeting, and it was very much about everybody should be looking at themselves in the mirror. If you're doing everything that you can to have the best year that you can possibly have, then you got nothing to worry about. But if you're not, you need to just focus on you. And since then, we've seen much better performance across the board. When it comes to the bullpen, they also made a switch right around that time where Edwin Diaz went on the IL, and they brought up Daniel Nunez, and as well as Danny Young, who pitched well but actually just got optioned when Diaz came back off the IL. But Nunez, really good pitcher that I love in this bullpen now. Edwin Diaz tonight was hitting 100 again, which we hadn't seen for much of this season. So they basically put him on the IL. That said it was a shoulder issue, had him rest for about a week, and then all of a sudden he looks like Edwin again. So I think their bullpen is coming out of it a little bit. What I would look out for if you're a Padres fan, if you ever can bet like live in innings, when Adam Ottavino comes on, that's when you should just hammer the Padres are about to score runs. If you can bet about like a home run in an inning or a hit, I'm telling you, Adam Ottavino has been awful lately. So that's one guy that you can look at. I think he has an ERA over 15 over his last 5. It's been bad. So Adam Ottavino's been bad. Brandon Nimmo can't get out of his own way right now, and he's still batting close to the top of the lineup. Lindor's been red hot, our guy. Mark Vientos, guy that you probably aren't aware of if you're a Padres fan, in his second full season here, really his first like time getting everyday looks, has been great at third base, and I think he has the third highest OPS in baseball with a minimum of 75 plate appearances. So he's been really good. JD Martinez has been good. Starling Marte has been hot lately. So those are the hitters that have been hot. Nimmo, Ottavino, awful. I hope that covers most of it.
Yeah, I think, because I really asked you to just lay it out. Firstly, we started with bullpen. I meant to say, by the way, starting pitching is the advantage that the Padres have, and I was right because I looked it up. The bullpen for the Padres and Mets. Now, I will say that I think that the Padres bullpen has a little bit more talent in it. I think the Jeremiah Estrada Robert Suarez combo has been a revelation this year. Robert Suarez is kind of doing like, to a very smaller extent, what Edwin Diaz did a couple of years ago, where it's just going at guys. It's so funny. I mean, the Padres fans, we like making the joke that all of his pitches, his pitch repertoire is fastball, faster fastball, and fastest fastball. Like, he just goes out at people. He'd be like, oh, you want me to pitch the 8th inning and then the 9th too? Yeah, whatever. Okay, fine. Like, it's just the guy just comes out there. And then there's been some inconsistencies elsewhere. I think the one to watch out for would be Yuki Matsui for Padres fans. He's been a little bit weird. I think it's a question of, first of all, his first year in the league. Secondly, high leverage situations. I think he struggled in mightily this year. He blew the save against the Angels, or was it the Royals? It was the Royals, I believe, for example, this past week. So he's one to watch out for. But otherwise, this Padres bullpen's talented. It's really good. Even a guy like Steven Kolek worked out of a bases loaded jam in this last series really well. And then starting pitching. Starting pitching for the Padres has been shaky, but not bad, all things considered. If I told you that Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish, that the latter would be hurt and then the former would be hurt and bad, you'd probably be like, oh no. Because the Padres, one of the things coming into the year was that they were a little bit of a house of cards situation with their rotation, and you don't want to call up your prospects too quickly. And man, we're going to see that pitcher rotation. I quickly want to mention, though, I don't know if I mentioned before with the bullpen, Padres and Mets. The Mets have a 3.72 ERA, Padres at 3.74, 13th and 14th best in baseball, respectively. So it's been weird for Padres fans. They don't trust anyone in this bullpen outside of Estrada and Suarez, but hopefully they can get the Mets at the right time. I think this is going to be interesting because the Mets, I will always be scared to face teams that have guys that are good that aren't hitting well. I'm sorry. I will never not be scared of that because it's going to happen against someone. Someone's going to light its fire under them, right? I think that, we're going to see how that pans out. I'm wondering, though, I want to ask you really quickly before we talk about the starting pitching matchups. What do you think is going to happen to Pete Alonso? What's going on? I know you've probably talked about this every day for the past 2 months, but for the Padres fans, because there have been a couple of moments where everyone's like, yo, the Padres should trade for him. You know what I mean? Let's bring him over here. Bogarts is out for the year. We'll put, Arise can play DH. And then we'll put, I don't think it's realistic anymore, especially after the Arise acquisition and the fact that Donovan Solano has been so good. But talk about Pete Alonso real quick for the people.
Yeah, it feels like everybody, like the best report that I've gotten that I keep saying is like rival executives think the Mets are going to trade Pete Alonso. And it's like, okay, so rival executives want the Mets to trade Pete Alonso, but we still don't know if that's what they're going to do. And I have always believed that the Mets are going to carry this through the season. And you look at the next free agent class. There's some guy named Juan Soto, I think you might remember. He's going to be a free agent. There's Pete Alonso, there's Alex Bregman, and there's like not another impact bat to be found unless Cody Bellinger opts out. I personally believe that the Mets want to let this whole thing play out. And ultimately, they think that Pete's going to test the market. He's not going to see what he expects, and he's going to come back. And I bet you he signs a contract that's going to have a big number and then a big deferred number, kind of Ohtani style. That's what I think is going to happen. So that's my prediction. I think Pete Alonso, when it's all said and done, his contract is going to look a lot like Brandon Nimmo's, where he's making, like, on average annual value, a little bit more than $20 million a year, and he's going to be a Met. But I honestly have no idea, because in 6.5 weeks here, he could be on another team. And then basically, here's what I'd say to try to sum it up quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If Pete Alonso is traded, that tells you they had no intention of signing him. If they keep him, I believe he'll get re-signed this offseason. I don't think that he's going to make it to the end of this year, and he's going to end up on a different team in free agency. So that's where I'm at with it. It's either going to end soon, or I think in the end they'll figure it out.
You know what? I'm pulling for him. I hope he stays, because that man was hitting a bunch of home runs at the Derby playing Mob Deep. Like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen for a Mets player in a long time.
47 home runs from the franchise record. And I said in my article this week, I'm like, if the Mets just manipulated his service time in 2019, they'd have another year and he would have gotten the record. But, you know,
you're evil. You're evil, man. You're evil. But
I'm just saying.
I relate to first of all, I do relate to the idea of, like, the Padres. Like, I'm not saying you should manipulate service time. Maybe don't extend every single player under the sun as soon as they do well. But one thing Padres fans could definitely, you mentioned the rival executives, just to go on a little bit of a tangent. 2 years ago, the 2022 bad season for the Padres, when they had their collapse in the second half, the article that came out, first of all, great article from The Athletic. It was well done. But one part, they said rival executives think that it might behoove the Padres to trade Manny Machado. And you get this, Ryan. They were like, similar to the Nolan Arenado deal. I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? Like, that
the
was
Padres. Rival executives believe the Padres can make a horrible trade, just like the Rockies did. Yep.
It's like, what? Yeah. I was like, no, that crossed the line.
What's it, John Mozeliak? Is it him? Was he the one who said, hey, they should trade us Machado too? We'll play him at short. Why not?
Yeah, we'll trade Machado to the Mets for Ottavino, apparently. So that's basically the equivalent. But folks, we're gonna get into the pitching matchups. Dare I say the most exciting part of this, because we get to talk about my guy, the pride of the knuckleball, the pride of Patrick Mahomes, Matt Waldron. I can't wait to talk about him. But before we do that, I just need to take a second to talk to you about one of my favorite things in the world, folks. That's Game Time. All right, did I exaggerate? It's maybe not my favorite thing in the world, but it is up there, because Game Time helps you experience sports by getting tickets every game, whatever you want at any time. And they've got so many deals. I literally got tickets not too long ago for a Yankees game against, I think, the Marlins. So somewhat relevant to now. They're great. The Game Time app, with it, they have a bunch of different flash deals, zone deals. So flash deals like before the game. Let's say you don't know if you're going to go to the game. You don't know how long you're staying at that happy hour with your coworkers after work. Well, don't worry. You can wait up to the minute, and sometimes prices go down for you. They've got zone deals, so like the literal zone of like the stadium and stuff. And event cancellation protection, job loss protection. If you find better seats, they will credit you 110% of the difference. And also, it's not just baseball. It's also NBA. It's any sport, comedy clubs, theater, the concerts, all sorts of stuff with Game Time. It's time to get your game on with Game Time, folks. Come on. I mean, what are we doing here? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with Game Time. And just like that, folks, we are back here at the Locked On Padres podcast with Mr. Ryan Finkelstein, host of Locked On Mets. In the waning moments, we must now break down the pitching matchups. In Friday's game, we are getting ourselves a battle of the facial hair, dare I say, or formerly facial hair. I forgot. Sean Manea, he's no longer, right?
I think he thought he was playing for the Yankees at one point. I don't know what happened, but he went from Aquaman to Clark Kent. I mean, he just shaved off the hair, the face, completely different guy. What I love is if you still go to MLB.com, they still have him with the beard and the whole deal. It's two different people. Yeah,
that's why I said that. That's why I said that, because I'm looking at the app right now and it shows him with the hair. Sean Manea, former Padre, of course. What can you tell him about how his season has been going? Because his last time with the Padres, now I got no beef with the man. He was okay player for them, but man, he was dreadful. For those who don't remember, I believe didn't get out of an inning and gave up like 7 runs against the Phillies or whatever in the championship series. So what can I say?
Yeah, Sean Manea, he looked pretty good in April and May. He did.
It just sounded like you were like, oh boy.
Well, his last 2 starts have been pretty rough. So he's given up 6 runs each of his last 2 starts, and that has seen him add a full run to his ERA. He had a weird one against the Diamondbacks where he struck out 10 and gave up 6 runs. So not often you'll see that combination of statistics, but overall, I'd say Sean Manea, at times you watch him and he has great stuff, but he can lose the strike zone. He can get into these counts where he just can't put a guy away, even with his good stuff, and they're fouling pitches off and his pitch count gets really high. He really struggles to get past 5 innings. And, if you're kind of going into the series as a Padres fan, wondering the state of the Mets bullpen, I believe all 3 games in that series against the Marlins. Actually, today, Sevy might have got through 6, but I think that was the first time. The other 2, the guys did not make it past the 5th inning. So, I think that's something to watch for in this series. If you look at these matchups, the Mets bullpen might have to do some of the heavy lifting here.
We'll have to see. Yeah, I mean, the Padres have had an advantage. And while people might not be familiar, well, they might now because of the Patrick Mahomes tweet, but Matt Waldron has been a revelation and one of the better pitching development stories that the Padres have had in years. And I mean that. Now, I'm not saying best pitchers, but best pitching developments, i.e. like a prospect guy. This is not someone that they, made a giant trade for, like a Dylan Cease who gets all the headlines. Matt Waldron has gone from a guy who just looked like he was pretty good for a 5th starter and was a novelty because you were like, we love the knuckleball, this is fun, to a guy that's pretty legit. His slider has improved and his ERA is at 3.76 now. And his last few starts have been really good. This is a guy who went 6 innings at least in his last 3 starts. And then the one before that, he only gave up 2 runs. So he's been really good. He doesn't necessarily generate a lot of whiffs. This isn't like a Dylan Cease guy, who I just mentioned before. But it's interesting to see that his other pitches, not his primary knuckleball, have been getting better, particularly sweeper, slider. Frankly, I'm still having trouble distinguishing. like all of those, I still am a little bit confused by sweeper, but that's what has been really impressive with him. And his expected ERA that's actually lower than his current one, which is, let me just check really, really quickly on that. I haven't checked that in a while. Where are you at, Matt Waldron? Expected ERA of 3.31, and his FIP is at 3.26. I'll take it. He's actually been overall probably the second best starter for the Padres this year. He's been available. He's really great. And Ryan, you might see some pitching ninja highlights because that knuckleball, when it's on, is something to behold. I will say, though, Mets lineup still has a lot of heavy hitters potentially in there that could wake up. And Waldron has gotten hurt before when that knuckleball isn't working. So I'm really curious to see how that goes, but should be a lot of fun, especially for a former Padre. Sean Manea. I'm curious to see how Padres Twitter tweets about him. And then we've got another fun matchup on Saturday. Well, not a fun matchup, but a fun little story. We've got Jose Quintana going up against the man, the myth, the legend with the 9 ERA, Adam Mazur, prospect for the Padres. Look, I think Mazur is pretty simple. This is a guy who has a steady fastball and a slider that graves as a really, really above average pitch. I'm not totally sure how the Mets have been against sliders this year, but he's been a tale of 2 cities. Guy had one good start his first game, 6 innings, only gave up 1 run, and then got battered around like Jared Leto in Fight Club in his second start, 8 earned runs across 3 innings. This is the one that could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if Adam Mazur is good because he's new. And sometimes new pitchers people don't know what the heck to do against them. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But what can you tell us about Jose Quintana?
First of all, I don't remember Jared Leto was in Fight Club. I mean, I've seen Fight Club, but Jared Leto's
Blonde
in
guy.
there?
The blonde hair guy, yeah.
I'm
That
gonna have to
Brad Pitt beats up. Or
I'm
not
gonna
Brad Pitt, Edward Norton beats up, yeah.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that.
Yep.
But Jose, so I will tell you too, if Padres fans are concerned about Adam Mazur, we saw tonight, what's his name? Rodri Munoz for the Marlins, who had like 4 starts and an ERA over 5, and he pitches against the Mets. He carries a no-hitter into the 6th inning. Mets fans know this well. It seems like we have an unproven starter that's young that goes up against the Mets. This has been forever. They have like their first great start against the Mets. So watch out for that. As far as Quintana, I can't believe that I have been doing this, but lately I have been campaigning for him to be DFA'd and take it. Like, that's how bad he has been. He has been awful. And what frustrates me, as you know, there's an incredible top 100 list at Just Baseball, and there's a guy at number 25, Christian Scott, who looks great. And I was loving watching him pitch in the big leagues, and they optioned him down because they got Tylor Megill and David Peterson back. And now Christian Scott's wasting bullets in AAA while I have to watch Jose Quintana get knocked out in the 4th inning every start. So Quintana doesn't look good, but he's also a guy that I have in the past enjoyed watching pitch. He does come at guys. And if he's on, he can get deep into games. But lately it's been, if you can get him out and you have a lead in the 4th, just pull him at 65 pitches because he's been hit pretty hard lately.
I've been campaigning for him to be DFA.
No, straight up.
Tells the story. What can I say? This will be interesting, though. This will be interesting. This is the type of game that the Padres need to come through on, but we relate. This is a Padres team that has literally been no hit by someone making their first major league start before. Shouts to Tyler Gilbert, I believe, from the Arizona Diamondbacks a few years ago. So we relate, but it's like we were both facing our arch nemesis.
I just have to.
That are new.
I literally had to look this up really quick to find it because there was this guy who threw a no hitter against the Mets years ago. He was on the Giants. Career 4.55 ERA. Chris Heston. I don't remember what year. I think it must have been 2015 with the Giants, but he threw a no hitter against the Mets, and his 3 years after that finished with an ERA over 10 in all 3 years. I mean, it's unbelievable. Chris Heston.
Oh man, what's going on with their team sometimes, man? But that one will be fun. And now that we've been talking about it, the game is going to end with a score of 1-1. So we'll see.
Wow.
But Sunday, folks, another good one. Believe it or not, actually the best pitching matchup of the series. Dylan Cease going up against Tylor Megill. Tylor Megill, Mets fans in my life have hated this man for a few years, but 3.16 ERA. 1-3, whatever. That doesn't matter. 32 strikeouts against 11 walks. Dylan Cease. I'll start off with Cease. Obviously, great pitcher. He's been a huge pitcher for this team, but he's kind of due for a really good start. Now, he was really good in his last one. Struck out 8, but it was against Oakland, and he did give up 8 hits. But for me, the story for Dylan Cease this year is, one, the velocity's back up, in my opinion, because my man's wanted out of Chicago, and I just think that my guy is motivated. He's like, we're back. Let's do this. And the other thing is not walking batters. That has been the craziest thing with Dylan Cease this year, which is why I keep saying that he's due. And his last few starts, aside from the Oakland one, gave up 3 against Angels, gave up 3 against the Royals, and gave up 4 against the Yankees, and 5 against the Braves. Not bad, just not. He's not been electric lately, the way that he came out of the gate. But I think he's going to be good. And most importantly, doesn't give up free bases. And as long as he's not doing that, this is not a Mets lineup, in my opinion, that has like oodles of home run power, which is something that Cease is susceptible to sometimes. But for me, this is a guy who has improved dramatically this year in the walk department. That has been what's so impressive. Shout out Ruben Niebla. You are an absolute king of a kingmaker, dare I say. His walk rate going down pretty significantly this year, 10.1% last year to 6.9% this year. So just awesome stuff. What can you tell us about Tylor Megill? Is it legit, or is this just some guy who's like the James Paxton, where he secretly has an 8.6 FIP or something like that?
Well, I'll tell you about Megill in a second. I just want to tell you, I had this gut reaction when you talked about Cease giving up home runs. I'm going to predict it now. And if I'm right, I'll totally gloat about this. But Pete Alonso is going to homer on Sunday. I'm just going to call that out. Okay. Now, as far as Tylor Megill, like you said, Mets fans don't like him. That still holds true. His last start against the Marlins on Tuesday, He went 4 2/3, and everyone's saying make him a reliever. But the start that I watched, he got dinged from some soft contact hits. He struck out 7 in the first 3 innings. And Tylor Megill is a guy, when he came up, he was one of those pitchers that was just tall in the minor leagues who had a good fastball that could just overpower people with the fastball alone, didn't really have another pitch. Now this guy is like a bag of like 7 pitches. Like he's got a sweeper, a slider, a curveball. He's got what they're calling the American spork because he learned Kodai Senga's forkball and is throwing what they're dubbing the American spork, which is a cool name for it. But he actually all of a sudden has really good swing and miss stuff. And I think he's on the cusp of maybe solidifying himself as a good starting pitcher for the Mets, but he's got to get deeper in the game. So that's the big thing for Megill. But the stuff is there. And honestly, if he can't figure it out, his brother in Milwaukee is a great reliever. And I think the Mets could have a lockdown reliever if they ever decide to convert him. But for now, he's going to get some more run in this rotation. And I've been excited to watch him pitch. He's got really good stuff. So I agree with you. This is definitely the best pitching matchup of this series, with all apologies to your knuckleballer and Sean Manea for the first one.
Yeah.
Because Quintana and Mazur is going to be, I mean, it should be fireworks. It won't be like you said, but it should be.
You know what? That's the sickos matchup. Like people like you and me are amped for that. You know what I mean? Because we're sickos. We're like, oh, I can't wait to see Adam Mazur. Oh, does Quintana get DFA'd? Like, or does he randomly have a good start that we make jokes about? You know what I mean?
Like spin zone I have in my mind. When he gets knocked down the 4th, I'm like, is this the start? Is this the last one?
Is this the final bout of one Sir Jose Quintana? Ryan, do you have any final kind of takes, things you want to get out for the good people out there?
I don't think I do. I'm excited to watch this series, and this is a crazy wild card race. It's nuts that the Padres are the only team in this wild card race outside of the Braves that are over 500, and so it feels like if like there might be 3 wild card teams who are just over 500 that make it this year. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if 83 wins is enough to make the playoffs in 2024.
Absolutely, because man, let me tell you, the Padres, you go from the A's, you had the Angels before, then the Mets, then you play the Phillies in Philadelphia. So that's gonna be tough. So we'll have to see how they play this weekend. I'm sure if the Padres play really poorly, everyone will be very calm and rational about it. Ryan, this has been a blast as always. And as always, everybody, thank you for listening to the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or follow Ryan, my good buddy, at Finkelstein Ryan on Twitter. Go check out Locked On Mets as well. It is excellent. And unlike me, did not miss 3 episodes this week. Until next time, everybody, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies, and stay magnificent, my Mets homies as well. Take care.